How's it going, everyone? As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. This is PSReady, my channel all about PlayStation. I hope you're having a great week, and I gotta ask, it would really help me out if you subscribe to the channel. I'm at 220,000 subs. I don't really have a goal, I just want more subs. So if you enjoy the content, please let me know by subscribing to the channel. In today's video, I've got 3 topics to cover, starting out with some new updates around the PS5 handheld. These are coming from Kepler, so you know they're legit. Then we gotta talk about Sony's smartest move in years. And finally, let's talk about what went wrong with Doom the Dark Ages. But yeah, let's jump into the first news story here because it's about this PS5 handheld. The reason I'm calling it the PS5 handheld is because it's going to run PS5 games. It's not going to run PS6 games. So even though it's going to come out in the PS6 generation, it's not technically a PS6 handheld. So the new updates are pretty strong here. It's coming out in 2028, which is around a year after the PS6 is supposed to launch. I think that's good. It could be cool to release these things side by side, but if they are being treated as different products, you want to get the full marketing cycle ready to go for both handhelds. So 2028 for the handheld, 2027 for the actual console seems to make a lot of sense. I'm curious if they'll do an end of the year launch like, every other console, or if they'll go Nintendo style and release in the middle of the year, like between March and June. Who knows? It's a far way away, so we'll just have to wait and see. As rumored, they are partnering with AMD for this one, but the new rumor that's coming from Kepler is that it's not using the PS6 chip. So the original leaks we got, I think from like Modern Vintage Gamer and partially Kepler, were that they were developing 2 versions of the same chip with AMD, one to run a base console, one to run a handheld. It looks like they're still working on 2 of the same chips, so maybe they're already in development on the PS6 Pro. Of course, they work way far ahead on this stuff, so who knows, but that could be what's going on. The long and short of it is, though, that this is getting its own dedicated chip, and it is going to be able to run PlayStation 5 games. Now, the weird key thing that they keep hammering home in all these leaks is that it's not going to be able to push the resolution of the PS5. I just felt like that was a given, considering, there's no 4K handhelds really in the PC space. I think the max they go up to is like 1200p, and even with great hardware like the Legion Go S or the ROG Ally X or the Steam Deck, your goal is always 800p. Of course, you're using FSR, but the best FSR you want to use is like ultra quality or quality, because 800p, 720p, which are technically the same thing, that's the resolution you're really pushing for. But with the power of this chip being basically on par with the PS5, just slightly underclocked, I feel like they're going to go for a 1080p screen in this handheld, and that's pretty cool. Now, I've seen that a lot of people are disappointed that it's not going to run PS6 games. I just don't think that's possible, A, and B, I think that's a little misleading considering how this generation went, where the PS4 is still around. Of course, they just ended production in the UK, I'm pretty sure. I saw a video from Black Panther talking about it, but like, it's still basically an available console, and they're still releasing games for it. It is stuck around a lot longer than something like the PS3 did in the PS4 generation, or the PS2 did in the PS3 generation. Like, it's totally insane how long they kept the PS4 around. It's very obvious that since the new goal for these companies is engagement, like having people spend time on their platform, a la the PlayStation Network, they're going to keep the PS5 around and the PS5 Pro. So that means a lot of the PS6 games that come out are going to be very similar to what we saw this generation, where they're going to be cross-generational. I hate that. I wish we could go back to the glory days when, you got a new console and you could visually tell the difference and see a massive graphical leap and maybe a frame rate leap. But no, the new future we live in is not only does hardware only get incrementally better now, we also pay more for it and pay more for it longer. I don't know how this happened, but I don't like it. But keeping that in mind, we will technically be able to play PlayStation 6 games on this thing, because the base hardware they're going to develop for, of course, is the PS5, and then they're going to just add in extra bells and whistles for the PS6, like better frame rates and higher resolutions, right? Like, that's what they're going to do. And I think it is time for Sony to re-enter the handheld space, right? Like, the Switch 2 is coming out. I've seen the Switch people saying how amazing Cyberpunk runs. It really doesn't. It's like on par-ish with the Steam Deck and has some issues. They put out like 37 minutes of footage, and there's a lot of frame drops going on. There's a lot of missing people walking around the world. And while it does look pretty good, it is not running anywhere near 4K, and 40 FPS is a good target. So like handhelds are getting bigger, they're running bigger games, and I feel like Nintendo, even with the performance issues that some of these games are going to have, is going to do well with third-party games like Cyberpunk and of course Red Dead Redemption 2 when that comes out later this year. So if Sony can put out a handheld that can actually run these games and make them look and run good, potentially better than the Switch 2, which should happen if this thing's goal is 2028, I think that's a no-brainer purchase for a lot of people for the same reason the PS Portal is, which is you could just play the games you already own, right? Like you could play GTA Online, you could play Red Dead Online, you could play Apex Legends or Battlefront 2, since that's resurging big time right now on the internet. They just can't screw up in the ways they did with the Vita. I would ditch the back touchpad. That was cool at the time, but it really quickly became a big hindrance for a lot of games. Of course, the memory card situation was ridiculous. There's no reason, if this thing is going to use memory cards, it shouldn't just use SDXC or whatever the next generation of that will be, because we'll be in 2028 time. And just make sure the price is fair, right? Like I know prices are increasing for handhelds. The Switch 2 is $450, base Steam Deck is $400, Legion Go gets all the way up to like $700. Like it's getting kind of crazy because they've got to pack in the screen, the controller, and everything else. But if you can come in at around the same price as Nintendo, if not just slightly more, I feel like people are going to go for this thing day one. And you got to really hammer home the fact that it is just a portable PlayStation. Like you need to hammer home the fact that it has trophy support, online access, you can message your friends, you can use the PlayStation Store, and it's the same PlayStation Store as your home console. But with Microsoft moving to PC, right? Like they're going to build a PC that has an operating system that's just ripping off Steam OS in the sense that it's going to have a game layer on top of it. They're going to do their own handheld and it's going to run that operating system. So they're going to be pushing Game Pass super hard, which will become relevant later in the video. So Valve is killing it. There's all these news stories coming out from the Legion Go S that they just released that runs Steam OS. It's getting like 20 frames per second better performance in most games than Windows, and like insane battery life. Dead Cells, for example, is like 2.5 hours on Windows version of Legion Go S, and it's 6 hours on the Steam OS version. Like it's running laps around Windows, and it's going to become a big competitor to PlayStation because the PlayStation Store has not been around as long as Steam, and people have built up much bigger libraries for way less money on Steam than PlayStation. So if other people are doing it, Sony's got to do it, and I believe in their ability to do it well. But yeah, speaking of Sony chasing other people's tails, let's talk about a way that they're kind of getting away from the eventual future of just putting all your stuff on PC that no one else is really doing. So you've heard of the India Hero Project, you've heard of the China Hero Project. That's where Sony goes to these countries and looks for games being made by developers that they can inject money into to make them exclusive to the PlayStation 5. Gotta be real, not aware of any of the India Hero Project games, but obviously Black Myth Wukong was a huge get for Sony. It did much better in China, its native country, on PC, but that's because it's been hard up until now to sell consoles in China, which is probably why Xbox and Nintendo don't put a lot of effort to even releasing their consoles or selling them at all in these other countries like China. But Sony, by going out of their way to work with the developers, aka the Chinese government, they found a way to make sure they can sell the PS5 in the China region, which is good because that's a huge market of billions of people that have mostly played on PC but are now looking to play on console. So coinciding with the Days of Play sale, Sony's dropping the price pretty heavily on the PS5 over in China, and I think this is a good thing because while everyone else is focusing on PC because they're just looking for new users they can convert and sell games to, Sony's trying to keep the console business alive in the similar vein to Nintendo, and I think that's important, right? Like Xbox can talk about all day long about how the console business is dying, how you got to go to PC, how you got to go to cloud, but like we'll talk about in a second, it's not really working. Like the future that they're saying is going to happen, it doesn't exist. So Sony's got to figure out ways to sell more consoles, and while they're doing really well here in the United States, because even though the PS5 is on par with the PS4, it's also way more expensive and you can still play games on the PS4, so it's actually doing a lot better than people make it seem. You got to go to other regions and sell your console there, and it's working. But speaking of sales data, let's talk about Doom the Dark Ages and what went wrong with this game, because it is like blowing my mind. So Doom the Dark Ages has been out for a few weeks now, and I could tell something was not right about it because of the way they announced how it was doing. So of course they said it's the biggest launch in Doom history, and if they didn't achieve that with it being free on Game Pass day one, that would be a much bigger problem. But they came out and said they got 3 million players in the first week or so of it being out, and on the surface that seems good, but I've been noticing this trend for a while now, where if a game sells really well, they say how many copies they sold, and if a game does really well on Game Pass but doesn't sell a lot of copies, they brag about how many players it got. And of course, that data is good. I'm sure a lot of people subscribe to Game Pass, or people who are already subscribed at least tried the game out. But if you ever want to see how Game Pass negatively affects games, pick a game, look at people's achievements. 99% of the people who play games on Game Pass download it, play it for 5 minutes, and then they fill their achievement list with 0 out of 1,000 game points or whatever gamer score. I don't even know the metric anymore. And I'm sure Xbox is pissed because now we have hard data and it is not looking good for the actual sales. So it looks like 2.2 million people played this game on Game Pass across Xbox and PC, which is a lot of people. But if you take that 3 million number, that means they've sold less than 1 million copies between PS5, Xbox, and PC. And it looks like virtually no one who's playing this game on Xbox actually bought it. It looks like 99 to 100% of them are just downloading it on Game Pass. So if you want to do the quick math there, 800,000 people in total have bought this game between PS5 and PC, which is abysmal, right? Like, it's Doom. Doom 2016 is one of the best games I've ever played. I remember back in 2016, everyone, myself included, just based on what we had seen, assumed that game would suck ass because they weren't showing it off in a good light. Then copies got out there early and everyone was like talking behind the scenes saying how amazing it was, and it was awesome. Doom Eternal, of course, dropped during 2020. That's one of my best gaming experiences ever. My landlord hated me in California because I bought new speakers for my PC for Doom Eternal so I could blast that soundtrack. And now we're hitting Doom the Dark Ages, and it's nowhere near as successful as those games. And on the surface, it really should have been if you just look at it from afar. But there's a few things that I think really hurt this. A, the accessibility options. I don't want to have the argument that like every game should have infinite accessibility options, which used to be called cheats when I was growing up. You could type in codes or do up, down, left, right, select, start, BA or whatever, the Konami code, and you get cheats in games. Now those get a nice little label called accessibility where you can tweak the difficulty to be story mode if you want. But on top of that, they made the game way too easy. Everyone's been complaining that even on the hardest difficulty modes, the game is a cakewalk, and you can turn the game speed up, you can turn it down, you can do whatever you want, but you can't really make it much harder, to the point where they had to do a patch to make it more difficult. So I think that kind of stopped people from buying it. Then there's the whole thing about removing glory kills. I wish I was in the room when that was suggested. I don't know if it was they didn't get enough time on this game or what, but removing glory kills was the dumbest possible thing they could do. That was one of the coolest things that Doom had with 2016 and Eternal. Then there's the fact that they're charging $70 for it, but it only has the campaign. Like, say what you will about Doom 2016's multiplayer. It started out rough, it got awesome, and I wish they would have just broken it off as a standalone thing because it was really fun. Doom Eternal did the battle mode thing, and I actually sunk a lot of time into that. It was like a asynchronous multiplayer thing like Dead by Daylight where one team played as demons versus one slayer. I thought it was pretty cool. This one is costing more at $70 and does not have any multiplayer or snap maps, so you can't make custom maps like you could in 2016, but the story is also the shortest at 15 hours. So like, they have bigger levels, the overall game is much shorter, and that's stopping people from buying it. But then the last thing that really ended up hurting it, which is kind of Bethesda's fault, kind of not, I'm willing to call it their fault, is of course Mick Gordon leaving Bethesda and not composing soundtracks for their games anymore. You should have just figured that out and paid him what he wanted, man. Like, that guy really was the linchpin of Doom and Doom Eternal's success. I still, to this day, every single day that I'm in the gym, which is 6 days a week, when I want to lift, I put on the Doom Eternal soundtrack. It is the best soundtrack from any video game, I think, in my lifetime, and losing him was obviously just such a huge blow. The weirder thing is they ended up getting the guy who does the soundtracks for New Blood Interactive's games and a lot of the other boomer shooters. I think his name's like Andrew something. I don't want to butcher his last name, but like the guy who does the Dusk soundtrack, they got him for the Old Gods Part 1 and 2. And while it wasn't up to the standard of Mick Gordon at all, it was still really good, and it was different enough to feel like a good new Doom soundtrack. They went with some weird corporation or company. It has some bizarre name to do the soundtrack for Doom the Dark Ages, and it's not good. I listened to the whole thing and it's just not up to par. So while it did have a lot going for it, it ultimately ends up feeling like a rushed game, and on PC you need a good graphics card to run it because it has forced ray tracing. I don't know why this is a trend now, but like the vast majority of people on on PC are using 8GB cards pushing to 1080p monitors that don't even support ray tracing. So like forcing ray tracing just is a no-go for most of the people on PC. So I really hope they got a lot of new subscribers on Game Pass, because if we lose id based on the sales of this over this stupid ass subscription model that they're forcing down people's throats all the time, it's just like, it's demoralizing, man. Like, I don't know. It just bums me out. Either this game didn't get enough time, it had bad direction from the start, but I really think having it free on Game Pass is the real nail in the coffin, man. Like, I think it would have sold way more copies if they just said, if you want to play this game, you got to buy it. Like, it's still not enough for $70, but people would have waited for it to drop to 60 before picking it up, and it would have made money in the end. But this is the future we live in. Xbox gives away their games for free and then closes down studios or sells them off because they didn't perform well enough. There just aren't enough people using the subscription service to really make it worth it. Oh my God, I also forgot that they did the game key thing where it wasn't on the disc. That was ridiculous, and I'm sure that impacted the sales on PlayStation. I'm not buying it. I'm waiting till it's 40 bucks. I'm not buying a single player game for $70 that has a short story and no extra content. I know that makes people mad, but like, I gotta do what I can with my money, and there are just better investments I can make for my entertainment. Sorry. So yeah, another Xbox release that's worse than the games that came before Xbox bought the studio. I'm noticing a trend. Anyway, guys, as always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, and shape on.